Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
And today we are talking with Diana Daniele. Diana is a tireless advocate for invisible illness and mental health. She endured years of chronic migraine and depression before finding healing. Diana writes about invisible illness, mental health, female friendship, and family dynamics, contributing to various publications. She's also a sought-after publicist for luxury brands. Diana is a pirate at heart with a make it happen attitude. And Diana, we are happy to be talking with you today.
Thank you so much, you guys, for having me on, for the swashbuckling me.
And yes, we warned you ahead of time, but we have a little poem for you written by Google AI. Would you like to hear what we have?
Oh, I'm thrilled. This will be the first. It's a first today.
In the realm of pain, a warrior arose. Diana Daniele, with strength she chose. Invisible illness, a burden she bore. Depression's grip she bravely tore. With pen in hand, her voice took flight, sharing stories, igniting the light. Mental health, a cause she embraced, advocating with passion, a tireless chase. Luxury brands sought her expertise, a publicist par excellence indeed. But beyond the glitz, a pirate's heart, breaking rules, creating a new chart. A make it happen spirit, bold and true. Diana Daniele, a pirate through and through. Her journey inspires, her words set free, a beacon of hope for all to see.
Ooh, now you're going to send that to me, right? I can put it on my Instagram.
Absolutely.
Hey, Google AI is getting scary good at writing poems.
I know, it's terrifying.
For a good chunk of time, like when it first put the suggestion up, like, hey, you can use Google AI, it made poems, but they weren't rhyming. It somewhat had a flow to it, but it was more fun. And it's only recently that it actually has figured out the rhyme, and it did really well.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of the iambic pentameter.
And I tried to get it one time. I was like, try doing a poem in like ABA, you know, like doing the rhyme style with like do it in this style, and it had no idea what I was talking about. Now it does.
How much do you have to put in to get that poem out?
All I did this time was write a poem for Diana Daniele, and it took, I'm guessing it took the intro mostly to write it, but yeah. It's getting scary good. So, we'd love to hear about you and your pirate's journey. What's brought you to where you are today in life?
Well, I have arrived at the shores of authorship after a sea voyage. When you put together the 5 years of invisible illness and the 4 years of mental illness, depression, and anxiety, that's like, 9 years of, and it's really an identity. Like it could have been any challenge. For me, they were physically and mentally health related, going from where I was to becoming, who the woman I was meant to be. Brave and speaking my truth. We all know that, we hold ourselves back, or we're kind of hiding, or we don't want to say it, we don't want to upset people. And I'm a little bit more like a pirate now. And I decided, not right away, but after I was healed from both of these, I decided that I was going to write a novel and incorporate a lot of things that had happened to me. And while I started it in 2020, like everybody else during the pandemic. And while I was writing it, I read a memoir that really impacted me. It was called Manic, a memoir written by a woman who was bipolar. And I realized then, after reading it, that I wasn't writing a novel, that I was writing a memoir, which is a little more difficult to do, not only from the fact that you have to kind of put your life out there, everybody knows all your stuff, things that are stigmatized like mental health, but because I wanted to be an advocate for the healing that I discovered that could help so many people, especially with not only the youth mental health crisis, but they say parents are so anxious about their kids because of that. And there's a loneliness epidemic. And so I wanted to tell my story and have it as truth so I could work as an advocate, which I've already started to do, and try, to put my story out to help others, make others feel seen, and hopefully, make it some kind of impact.
Oh, I thought Kron.
I'd
Okay,
love
there
to
she
talk. Yeah, sorry, I had to cough. I was on mute. I'd love to talk a little bit more about invisible illness. Like just kind of explain to our listeners, if they've never heard that term, what does that mean? And I'd love to hear your journey through that.
Yes. I recently found invisible illness had hit the Dear Abby column, because my mom, of course, very supportive, knows the buzzwords in the book, and she said, oh my gosh, so she clipped it for me, and it was talking about basically a lot of people who suffer from things that, like, if you have cancer, people know often you don't have hair. If you break your leg, you're in a cast. People can see that. There's a lot of sympathy and empathy. And especially, I've had people, my grandfather and my grandmother both died of cancer. So, cancer is kind of like the C word, and it's just terrible. And there's a lot for that. But people who are suffering, but that people can't see it, like when you have a migraine, it's invisible. So you can't see it. And then people end up, how when somebody passes and sometimes people say, oh, well, they had a good life, or you're lucky this, and you have to be careful what you say, because almost anything might be not as well received as one would hope. So you try to stick with people you don't know very well, like, I'm sorry, and these kind of things. So people would say to me, well, you don't look sick, as if it were an accusation, like I was somehow faking. And when I would go, I had they're 7 years apart. So a preschooler and an elementary schooler when this was all happening. And sometimes, as a mom, you have to show up, especially for my older son. It was a sports assembly, and it was a flag football, and there was a chance that he might win like the MVP because he made these touchdowns. I mean, he might not. So I was in. When you have chronic migraine, like some people, to explain the invisible illness of chronic migraine, you might get one like a couple times a year or once a month, and that is called an episodic migraine. So when I started getting them, I didn't know anything about migraines because I had no genetic link to it, even though it's supposed to be genetic. And they were just like, it was like never going away. And I would have one, and then I would go into it, and then I would have it, and then I'd be in the hangover period, and there would just be like a day when I'm just kind of coming back out, and I would get the next one. So it's kind of like living inside a painful prison of a headache. That's not just a headache. It has photo and phonophobia, where you can't have any sound that hurts, any light, or, for a long time, I couldn't even watch TV because it would trigger a migraine, because you have these things called triggers. And you're trying to really like avoid all of those. But if you have a trigger that's chocolate, you can stop eating chocolate, sadly. But if one of my big triggers was hormones, which, you can never control because they go up and down with your cycle. And so I was searching and searching for a cure, and I had tried so many different things until I tried something that was kind of ancient and alternative. And if I hadn't been in that much pain and tried everything else, I might have been afraid to do, but I did do it. And I have never had a headache since. And it is, I must say, I don't know if this is coming out in June, but this month is Headache and Migraine Awareness Month.
Oh,
2 million people worldwide suffer.
As someone
also, the problem of more women after, like if children get them, which isn't as common, but they do, It's the same for boys and girls. As soon as they hit puberty and the girls have the hormones and get their period, it goes to like 3/4 of them sufferers are women and only like 25% are men. So, and that has kind of caused migraines to go by the wayside. You're just hysterical. It's emotional. You're psychosomatic. You just have a headache, these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As someone that gets episodic migraines, I can't imagine like when you finally are coming out of the hole of one of those to like just go right back in. Like that must have been, yeah, devastating on your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like no escape. And interestingly, like when I would go to all the different doctors, lots of neurologists, I would talk to a nurse who had gotten better. And she said, but you will always, like, if you may never be able to, I couldn't drink coffee. Like, it's very interesting. Karan, maybe you can drink coffee, but it goes both ways. Like some people, coffee helps them. For me, it made it worse. Or if I had some, it could cause a migraine as a trigger. So you never really know, and there's like contradicting.
Yeah. Caffeine was always helpful. I know I live in Canada now and I can't get these here, but before I moved here, I used to be able to get the Excedrin migraine and they had caffeine in it. I think that's the only reason why they worked. But if I got it like early enough and I had an Excedrin migraine, it would be really helpful. Once it was like in the throes of it, then it wouldn't help.
It's kind of like getting a cold sore too. Like you have to catch it right then.
Right. Yeah. Right at the beginning. But yeah, I know the first time I got one, I thought I was having a stroke. I had no idea what was going on. I think it was like you said, with the auras and the sound, like sound and lights. And
I had really bad vertigo when I started getting mine. I had something called non-traditional migraine. And there's another word for it too, where I was getting everything else, but I wasn't getting the headache, which seemingly was much better. That only went on for a couple months. I passed out at a Dodger game. They thought it was my hypoglycemia. But I had those stars. But then, and those people are most interested in the aura of anything if anyone's ever asked me about. But then as I got into it, I stopped having the aura. It kind of came with and there's so many, there's ophthalmic where your eye, you can't see out of your eye and you actually get like pin vision. There's a lot of different kinds, and it's still amazing to me. I'm an advocate, having passed the program through the American Migraine Foundation. And it just like, it stymies me that people still think like it's just a headache. Like they don't know about, it's like a neurological disorder with all the, all this stuff happening. So we still have some work to do.
Absolutely. And I like what you kind of talked about there about invisible illness. And I recently read a book called Running Towards the Danger by Sarah Polley. She's a Canadian actress and writer. And
I haven't read the book, but I've heard the title.
Yeah, and it talks about her life as a child actress. She was in Anne of Avonlea. Anyways, a very big Canadian show. She suffered really bad. She had a really bad concussion, and for her it was years of dealing with concussion issues. And that's one of the things that she said. It even drove this invisible illness portion of her concussion, drove such a wedge through with her and part of her family, because there was just so many things that she couldn't do, and people didn't see her as being ill. Like you said, it was just, she said even to this day there's a wedge between her and her family from the way that she was kind of treated by some members because of this. Like you said, it's just not visible, and people don't understand the kind of suffering that you're going through. So yeah, it's also a really good book if anyone is interested in like learning more about like concussions. And she found a doctor who did everything opposite of what all the other doctors were doing. And she talks about how the fact that she was very privileged as a Canadian, she came and paid for this like private medical care. I think Pittsburgh, I don't know, somewhere in the US. But yeah, he was a concussion doctor that did everything completely different and opposite. And that's where Run Towards the Danger. He made her like kind of lean into those things that made her symptoms worse, which eventually made things better. But really good book as well, if anyone
did it help like to lead into it. And
Yeah, that's the one thing that like helped her concussion symptoms was, yeah, running towards the danger. Yes.
Yes, and they
That's fair,
also call
Polly.
that TBI, traumatic brain injury,
Mm-hmm.
where, I was in a car accident just a couple of years ago, and maybe 2 years ago, and I started getting a headache. At first, it was like, everything like a trash truck ran into me. But anyways, then I went to the ER because, everything doesn't manifest right away. And I found out I had a TBI. I didn't even know what it was. And then I was afraid they were all going to come back. And I told my doctor, this is going to ruin my story arc. But actually what healed me from the depression, the transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, it is also indicated for migraine and TBI. And so what happened is since I did that, I started it in the fall of 2018. And then it's 6 weeks, and then it takes a while. And I was grateful because it was like slow and steady, which was better than when I was healed from migraines. So when it was like a spontaneous, and it's like, you're almost not ready to like have that huge shift. But I was already going once a month to keep it up, because you cannot do that. And my friend that had PPD, she doesn't ever like brush up your Shakespeare. And she's fine, but because I went through so much, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this once a month as the insurance policy. And what happened is I had gotten in this car accident. I had the TBI. I went to go get my regular TMS for my depression. Well, I'm no longer depressed, but for that. And that day after I did it in the morning, and I'm like, my head is a lot better. It's really weird. And then we realized it could have, because it's indicated for migraine. It was passed by the FDA in 2013 to heal migraine. But that's not how I got rid of my migraines. And so we thought about it. And so I talked to the doctor, and I went like every day for a week and completely healed my TBI. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm still going once a month. So now I'm keeping the chronic migraine at bay and the mental stuff.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that treatment?
Okay, so the treatment, which is a long word, but they just abbreviate it by the initials TMS, is transcranial magnetic stimulation. And you sit in, like, if you can imagine, like a dental chair, and then there's like kind of an apparatus behind you with like an arm. And then they do like some things to figure out. It has to be in front of the prefrontal dorsal cortex or something like that, but they lay it across, and it's kind of a little bit heavy, and they want it to be snug. And then people have written about it, that it sounds like a woodpecker. Like some people call it pecking or tapping, because there's a rhythm of silence, the da, 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 and then silence. But in my dental chair, they had a TV up here where I was watching Friends on Netflix to kind of keep your mind off it. But it doesn't hurt, but it's kind of, you definitely know, because you can hear the tapping is not quiet. It's not like it's going to blow your ears out, but it's not like ting, ting, ting. It's like da, 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 da. And I have to share that since I've been writing the book, there has been a huge revolutionary discovery with regards to TMS. A psychiatrist out of Stanford Medical, they said that one of the things that has kept people, besides the fact that everybody wants to like give you pharmaceuticals, is that it's a long time. It's 6 weeks. And I had the privilege of having childcare and having the time. I wasn't working anymore, but not that I wanted to work. I could not work. And so I did this 6-week thing, but a lot of people can't get the time off work. They have chronic depression, and they just kind of get through life. So they said, what if we just shrunk the protocol? Would it still work if we, instead of doing it once a day for 20 minutes, Monday through Friday for 6 weeks, what if we did it like 10 times, because it doesn't hurt. So 10 times a day. So they had people come to Stanford, like tap, 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 have a coffee, tap, 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 have an ice cream cone, take a break. And they did it. And they shrunk it to 5 days, which is anyone who could get a week off of work if they are working, or even if they can't afford childcare, they could probably get like their friends to watch their kids, or if they're not in school, you can do some in 5 days, you can do it. So it makes it so much more readily accessible because it cuts the time. And they found not only does it work, yes, it works, it's even more effective. It's upwards of 80% or more that it works. Like when I did mine, they told me it's like 2/3, like about 67% of the people respond to TMS. And now it's past 80. So this is a huge discovery. And it's only now, it's just starting to be rolled out, into the American marketplace.
How does it work? Like, what is it doing?
Karan was wondering how does it work? And then I was also wondering like about is the reasoning why, so to add on to her question, it's the reason why it's more effective because they're doing it closer together in a shorter period of time. So
yes, I think it is. And I have to say, I'm not a doctor. So if we would have just like talked about this before and you were going to ask many, many medical questions, I would have had one of my psychiatrists come on with me. But I think it's kind of like when you put something like with the pressure, like the steamer, when you make the broccoli, it gets done a lot faster in the steamer because it's tight. I think it's that same thing with your brain. And so what it does though, in layman's terms, when you're tapping on it, they're tapping. What happens was when you're depressed is that you have a negative feedback loop of hating yourself, self-loathing, everything bad. Like you can't access joy no matter what you do. You have your favorite food, your child smiles at you. You try to take a walk, anything that would elicit joy in your life. It's like it's all been taken from you, and all you feel is this endless dark sadness that you just want to end your life because you don't want to be in it anymore. And so what happens is that your thoughts, the longer you are depressed, the more the feedback loop of the thoughts, it's not even using the part over here because it's only having negative. So when they tap on it, it's waking up regions of the brain that have like the joyous thoughts and the positive thoughts. And I love you know what I mean? Because they're lying dormant, because the brain, while it's such, a marvel of neuroplasticity, it also, modifies to whatever you're telling it. You're like programming it by your thoughts. So the more you're in the negative thoughts, your brain actually changes and like tries to make it easier for you to continue to think about how you should kill yourself because you hate yourself and you're worthless and nothing. And so when you're tapping on, they do it at us. Obviously, it's very scientific where they put it, but it brings it all back. I went from like completely dark to gray to pastel to like living color. And that was all having to do with the brain.
It's really interesting too, because I'm guessing the tapping, like it's magnetic therapy. So I'm guessing it's also working with your brain waves, the electromagnetic field in the brain. And I had something else I was going to say. I forgot completely what it was. But yeah, the negative thought pattern. Like a good image that I was told one time too is like when you get in a pattern, you keep going down it, like thinking of a ski slope. You get in these grooves, and just if you continue to go in these grooves, it's really hard to get out of it. But like if you can cover over that with fresh snow, you have a lot more room to navigate through, and you can create new paths and go in new directions. So yeah, I like
because you get like the tires make a rut.
Then
you can't scale the wall.
So you have to So yeah, just the idea of how that tapping around on the brain can help to get those ruts washed away.
The areas you're not using that are laying dormant, the tapping wakes them up.
Yeah, I imagine it's just reigniting those neural pathways before they kind of go completely dormant, maybe? Use it or lose it.
Yeah, well, if you're still alive, you might have it's still possible. And, I haven't done brain research myself, but just like listening to some people on podcasts and talk about the wonder of the brain, like how, you're not even like practicing the piano, but the brain is so smart. Like you can watch someone practicing piano, it will actually improve your piano playing.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with sports, like watching other people play basketball and you're focusing on it and you see what they're doing. You haven't even done it yourself, but whatever it's doing up there, it's magical.
Talk to us about what you're writing.
Well, I'm writing, as I said, the novel turned into a memoir, because also people were telling me for not a lot of people, like these people I've been talking, when I pitched the woman, it was on a Zoom, I met one of the people that works for the New York Times Opinion. And I started it with, do you know what transcranial magnetic stimulation is? And she, and usually people at newspapers are more informed than anybody else. They've got the AP wire coming in and they work in information. And she said, no. So that is, nobody knows what that is. And then the way I was healed from the migraines was through herutotherapy, which is the ancient term for leeches, which are those flat brown that they're in like streams and rivers. And in the olden days of yore, like I was a huge reader. So when I was young, I remember reading novels or even like YA novels, but they would use the leeches to a counterproductive effect where the person had consumption is what they used to call cancer. So they have cancer. So putting leeches on is not going to do a damn thing. It's only going to make, because you're going to get weaker because you're going to lose your hemoglobin. So they used it counterproductively. So leeches became like anathema to like the medical establishment. But this woman was actually, she's from the Ukraine, had lived here many years, was another friend that I had at school. And she said to me, she used to take my daughter home, that Natalie and Dana were in the same piano. They were doing it together and they would do duets. And I would have a migraine. You probably can relate to this because you get migraines, Karan. So I would go there and then the sound of the actual playing, and I would just I'd already be in bed. So I drive her over and I couldn't wait to go back to the dark room and be in bed. So I would ask my friend, I would ask her, Tatiana, will you please bring Dana home? Because we lived close to each other. And so she always would. So then she starts telling me she had been a model in her native Russia. And she used them, celebrities. Miranda Kerr is one who was in like Vanity Fair talking about using them it's like a leech facial. And they get the blood that the leech has sucked out and then they put it across the face. It tightens it. It's very, healing because they're taking out all the toxins, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, she said, I used to do it for cosmetic purposes, but my friend Irina, she can heal you. She can heal the migraines. So I thought about it. I'm like, I don't know. But then the next time she said, if you don't go see my friend Irina, I'm not taking Dana home from piano lessons for you. So then it's like, well, what could it, I looked it up. What could it hurt? I'll just try it once. And from the very first time that I went to Irina's, it looked like where you get a massage, like one of those examination kind of massage tables. And she didn't put them like on my head because everything's like reflexology, like this, your liver or your kidney corresponds to your head. And so they were all on my trunk. And then they do this nice thing where they bite down. Like it's kind of like when your baby latches on when you're learning how to breastfeed. So you kind of feel that first thing. So they're so kind, leeches. They have a natural antiseptic. So they bite down and it's a little pinchy, shoddy kind of thing. But then it dissipates and it goes away because they have their own natural anesthetic. And then they would when she put them on, they were like just totally flat. And then when she would take them off, they would be like roly-poly caterpillars because they're all full of your blood. But the reason we think it worked is because part of the thing about having migraines that often is that you're taking a lot of medication. And then the doctors, you not only take the triptans, I was on to keep the castle walls up, preventatives. So I was taking something called Topamax. And then they give you like a beta blocker or this, and that. And so my blood was polluted with all these medications I was taking over 5 years trying to make myself better. And the leeches take out all the toxins, and then your body creates new, fresh, beautiful blood to restore your body. And that's why I think it worked.
Yeah, it's interesting because we listened to your episode with our friend Megan Judge. We had her on our podcast a while ago, and I listened to your episode and I looked into it, and I'm like, I was surprised to learn that they still use leeches in like the medical system
Well,
today.
they
which
are
is
the NIH, National Institute of Health. I was
Mhm.
trying to get this essay published. The first one I got published was about the TMS, but that's still like doctors, real doctors do it. And then I was trying to get like a big publication to do it, and everybody like backs off when they hear about the leeches. So I had a link to the NIH, which talked about how they are used for arthritis, osteoarthritis, and for gangrene. It's like the best thing you can do. It's because it brings the blood circulation. And a friend of mine is a OR nurse. You know, she hands the scalpel, and she said, we have them in the OR. I mean, they are used. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
And I want to say that this could just be because I've watched Grey's Anatomy, but I want to say that like leeches can be very useful in like if there's an amputation and they have to put it back on.
Yes.
So yeah, we're not happy.
I'm just going to tell you this. I have 7%. I think I have to go get my do you edit this? Because it's going to go out if I don't get the charger.
Yeah, go get your charger.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking about the leeches and kind of their use in the medical system, and you said you had success just after your first initial treatment with them. So what was that like for you to like suddenly not have migraines anymore?
Well, you know, right after that treatment and the days that followed, I was like waiting for the other shoe to drop, like waiting for the next migraine to come. Like maybe I'm not going to have them for a week, or they're going to get more spread out, but it's going to come. So I was like, looking over my shoulder, and the more that time passed, I'm like, I think I am healed. And, the TBI from the trash truck running into me aside, I have never had like a real migraine where you're going through the prodome and then, the trigger and all the way through to the hangover. But the sad thing was that one would think that the book would be over at that point, but you're really only halfway through because of the invisible illness and me not being able to function as a normal person. I was obviously working as a publicist when this happened, but I eventually had to resign my clients. I remember one wanted to be a sponsor for a golf tournament in Shady Canyon in Irvine, down in Orange County, and they wanted me to come and be at the VIP tent. And, I just couldn't do that. I had very few days where I was really very vertical. And I had gone with restaurant reviewers. It was a restaurant in Orange County that was going to be a sponsor for the golf tournament. And so I would go to the bathroom and start taking the triptans because I could feel it coming. And I would just, try to get through it. And then I worried about driving. I live in LA, so it was like an hour home with the headache. And it was just, it was untenable. So then when you don't work, and I was a person that was very career focused, and it was part of my identity. Like, that's why I had an epiphany only a couple months ago that the book is about identity. And so that's taken away, and your connection to the greater world in your community is taken away. So it's very isolating. Then, my kids were small. A lot of my social life took place around my children's private school, and people eventually, like, they got mad because they would have a party and I would say I was coming, but then I didn't because I'd be in the middle of something else. And I lost pretty much every friend that I had at that school. And some of those friends, it was like, oh, well, we're just all there together. But as I talked about with Megan Judge, the fabulous podcaster of Judging Megan, a mental health podcast, you know, some of them I thought were like lifers, like they say you're friends with someone for a reason or a season or a lifetime. I thought they were lifetime friends.
Mm.
And it was like whiplashing how quickly I was replaced. Like my very best friend hitched her wagon to somebody else as I was like watching, because we all had to be there for this, and that. And they became like besties. And we didn't have a falling out because we didn't like each other, but I was I wasn't able to function as like a normal person anymore. And so she just didn't want me.
Mm.
And as somebody that's gone through,
And that caused the depression. I mean, that was part of the going down, because I also, people were like saying I was erratic because I would go to school and I often would cry because I was in so much pain, but nobody knew I was crying. And then they thought I have to kind of fill in the blanks. People aren't telling you everything. I was erratic. Then someone started a rumor that I was coming on to the new head of school. It had been a female, then it was a male. And there was just all this stuff swirling around, and I became kind of like the adulteress, even though I wasn't. I was happily married, and I was not much intimate with my own husband because I was constantly in pain. It wasn't like a picnic for him. So I just started to it's almost like I took everything they said and then I made it true for myself, even though it wasn't true. And I hated myself. And when I was depressed, I think I told this to Megan too, like one of the scenes in the book, like I felt like I was a bad mother. My son graduated from elementary school. I put my daughter in the public charter school because we moved and it was on our street. So I wasn't in touch with those people anymore. But I felt so judged and so bad. I said, I'm a bad mother. I would go when my husband was at work and I was home alone, my kids were at school. I would take a trash bag into my son's bedroom and I would look around. I would go rummage through his drawers and look in his closet, and I would find evidence that I was a bad mother. Mm-hmm. And then, because I thought the Child Protective Family Services was going to come and they were going to take my children, I would put everything in the trash bag because I had to get rid of the evidence so that I wouldn't be found out. And then I had to dispose of the trash bag, and I couldn't do it in my town because people would see it and they would sabotage me, or it would be out there. So then I had to drive to another town like 10 miles away and find a dumpster. And that was all my insanity.
So what kind of, what were you throwing away?
That's in the scene. I mean, I find, when your kids outgrow their clothes, you're supposed to either give them to somebody else that who has a younger sibling, or you give them to the Salvation Army, or you even throw them away. But because it had been so many years, because this is after 5 years of migraine, I hadn't really cleaned out my son's closet very much because I wasn't really myself. And so then I saw, and I'm crazy. So like I see all the things that I didn't do. So I put all the things that were too small for him into the bag because I thought, I'm a terrible mother. I never went through his closet. Then in his underwear drawer, I find like the rosary, the little boy praying made out of ceramic, and, a little statue of St. Michael, whatever, like from his first communion. And I'm like, my mom, she would have made it into a shadow box and hung it up in the room, or she would have done something with this. He hid them in his underwear drawer. It's obviously my fault. And then we have to get rid of that. And then I went to his desk and I found a journal I had given to him. He was in his final year of this wonderful day camp that really helped shape who he was. Like, he felt safe there. And so he was very sad it was ending. And I gave him a journal because I like to write in a journal. It was a journal with like camouflage, so it would be appealing to a boy. And I looked in it, and he had only written in it that one time. And I'm like, why didn't I pass on the tool of journaling to my son? He never used it except this one time. I'm a bad mother. Put it in the trash bag.
And so,
go
ahead.
I was going to say, as somebody who has been on both on the side of having friends who you lose along the way, but also being on the other side of I have this invisible illness and now I'm feeling better from it. Two questions, like for people, because a lot of people have their own stuff going on, but sometimes truly do want to show up for somebody, but might feel like they don't know how, or feel like they maybe feel like they're being pushed away or whatever. What are some things that you would say, like, would have been really supportive and helpful to you during that time? And then on the other side, now that you're on the other side, what are some things you'd like people to know who are going through an invisible illness to know?
I think that happens to people too. Like if you have like the horror of a child loss where your child dies. I have talked to someone and been on their podcast where, she's trying to raise awareness about it was a drug overdose. And she said she lost, on top of all the pain of that, people didn't know what to say and they felt so bad. So people just, it's not like they were dropping her. It's just, they didn't want to be with her because they didn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the while you can intellectually understand they didn't want to say the wrong thing, they didn't know what to say, so they stayed away. But the truth is they stayed away. I have a dear friend that has been my dearest friend since we were 8. We were in 3rd grade. And then my friend Kristen, who's the one who got me into the TMS, she lived in my town. But I can count on one hand like the people that were there. Because also I didn't reach out. One of the things I did when I started getting better from the second time when it actually took was I knew I was getting better. I went through my phone and all these people that they hadn't done anything to me, but they don't live in my state of California that I hadn't talked to. I started texting them, or people I knew through my job that live in Los Angeles, but they were more work friends. I texted everybody. And I had this huge parade of like lunches and connections with people that I was completely out of touch with. And that's how I knew I was coming back, because I wanted to. When I had the migraines, I wanted so much to not be dropped. When I was mentally ill, I thought everybody hated me. So I thought they would only be getting together with me because for whatever reason, but not because anyone could ever like me. Mm. But they talk about like cognitive distortions, like I don't have any friends, and you believe all those things. Mm-hmm. So, but if you're going through it, there was a great book that came out called The Invisible Kingdom. It won the book award. It's by a woman named Megan O'Rourke. Hers is a lot about Lyme disease, which is also invisible. Mm-hmm. But she helped not coin, but the buzzword was out there, but her book kind of cemented it. And then she used invisible in the title, The Invisible Kingdom. Like that's where all of us live who have these invisible illnesses in this kingdom that no one wants to visit or doesn't know about. And then it was in Dear Abby. So maybe there's going to be more heightened awareness. I would say to get over the fear that you might say the wrong thing, or don't think that like another person told me, she lived in Malibu and she was having a party. And I said, I had all these food triggers, right? So I could only have the chicken. I couldn't have the barbecue sauce. I couldn't have it if it was made with onions. I was able to eat a shallot because it comes from a different family. So she really wanted me to come. So I said, I'll just bring my own food. And she goes, no, I'll have the caterer do something for you. So she did. And then I had to cancel because I was in a terrible space and I was in bed in the dark. And then she gave me a lecture afterwards, like, no one's going to invite you to anything anymore if you're always canceling. And that woman, who remains nameless, never invited me or reached out to me. And I thought she was one of my good friends. Mm-hmm. But she was upset because I canceled and she had made that extra effort. And even though it was like, hello, I'm telling you that this is what's happening to me, I don't know why it doesn't compute. Like people can't get past their, like, I don't know. It's a quandary and I can't solve it, but I can try to help. Mm-hmm.
Oh. I was wondering, Karan, if you had that question that I interrupted you earlier before.
No.
Okay.
I'm good. We answered.
Cool. What is Do you have the title for your book? Like, and the date? Do you know when it's going to be out?
I don't have a pub date yet. The working title, it's, oh my gosh, it's so loud. It was like my daughter's texting me. Damn girl, because a lot of like wild, uneducated, a lot of memoirs are one word, but often they have a colon and then like a description. So it's like, Damn Girl, a miraculous memoir of motherhood, migraine, and madness. So you could just call it Damn Girl, or you can have the whole thing. The part is to give more information for people looking at the book cover to see if anything resonates. Are they a mom? Do they know anyone, or have they ever had a migraine?
Very cool. So is there somewhere where our listeners can go to follow you and keep up on when like the book's going to be published and all that you're doing?
Absolutely. The best place to go is to Instagram, and I follow you, the Pirates Podcast. Because every time something happens, I'm posting it. And then in the link tree, I have my website. I have every piece I've written for the different publications. So it would be the West Way. And also, please follow me, because in order, I have to have a platform to get the book published. So the more people that follow me, the better it is for my publishing deal. And it's at Diana Danielle PR. But I'm sure you could put that in your show notes or something.
Yep, we'll have it there. Yes. So go check the show notes. And before we ask our last question, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you might want to touch on, or any last question you may have for us?
Just, I would like to know how you're friends, because, I've written about female friendship, and I think female friendships are so important. Like even if you have this happy marriage, they're not wired the same way. You need your female friends. So how did you meet each other, and how did you decide to have the podcast and do it together?
Good question. We will say that we'll start with the fact that Kristen and I have never met
in person.
Really?
In person. Yes. She's the only person that I talk to every day that I've never met in real life.
Yeah, I'm down in Portland and Karan's up in Vancouver, Canada. So
did you meet in a chat room, or?
We met doing
a
course together, an online course. So yeah, the course was over
for podcasting?
For coaching. And the course was over a year. Not all at once, just split up into like 3-4 levels. I can't remember. Keep track of how many levels we did. 3,
and then a bonus ancestry
then the bonus
course.
one. So we met there, and it was it COVID? And it was COVID anyway.
It was, yeah.
All of our
I
friends
think it started
Zoom.
before COVID, but then it really got built up during COVID. Well, everybody's on Zoom anyway.
Yeah, so we became Zoom friends, and then one day I'd been wanting to start a podcast, so I asked Kristen if she would do it with me, and she said yes, and it kind of went from there. We brainstormed what we wanted to do, and we had talked briefly before we hit record about like the fact that it's a pirate themed podcast. So one of the books that was required reading in the course that we did is called Be More Pirate by Sam Conniff. So it was all about how pirates kind of changed the world and wrote their own pirate code and kind of lived their life by their own rules. And so we took that theme and decided that we wanted to talk to other pirates that were out there kind of living life differently. And that's how the whole thing kind of came about.
Yeah, I love the name
3 years
and
ago?
the concept. That's so clever, but not on your nose. And then it brings out the inner pirate and swashbuckler in all of us that, trying to cut our own path. Like listen, but then also not be afraid to jump off. I don't want to say a cliff because that's not in the ocean, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was just over 3 years ago.
Yeah. And like with the pirate idea too, I worked in childcare and every now and again we'd have dress up days. And I would say like the pirate theme, almost everybody got excited about like the girls, the boys, the teachers, like gonna dress up and figure out some way to be like a pirate. It could be a princess pirate or like a pirate, like, yeah, like Captain Hook or somebody like that. But there's just something similar almost to the superhero feeling when you talk about pirates. Like, yeah, this little piece of you comes out that's like, I get to do fun things and like go on adventures. And yeah, I think everybody likes the idea in some way or another of
And it really
pirates.
transcends, because I was thinking when my daughter was little, what the Thaddeus, her little preschool boyfriend, we did a party together because they were born a couple days apart. It was like princesses and pirates. And so we get over the princess thing, but pirates transcends all, it appeals to all ages. I mean, it was really interesting, for the 4-year-old boys to be, aye, matey, but it's still, the archetype persists throughout the age span.
Yeah. So that's how we became friends. And one day,
I was recently just a couple hours away, but my passport is currently with the government because I had to get it renewed. I cannot leave the country right now. But I was in Seattle recently, which is closer.
So close. So we'll get there soon. Or you know what? Or never. And just maybe I don't like how she smells. I don't know. You never know. Or maybe you don't like how I smell. So yeah. So that's our story, and highly recommend reading Be More Pirate. Great book. We talk about it many times on our podcast here. We've had Sam on our podcast as well.
I took a screenshot of the three of us that I was going to post. Is that all right? And can I tag you? I would tag the pirates.
Yes. Go for it. And we do have a final question for you. Yeah. So do you have any recommendations for our listeners about how they could go about starting on their own pirate journey, or getting their pirate life going?
I know that you have to give yourself permission that you're deserving, like such a big thing. I mean, being in a woman's body, I think of it from a woman's perspective, that we all wonder, am I enough? Like we should all go around saying, I am enough. I am enough. I'm deserving. And that they deserve to have their pirate life, and that's going to feed them. And you talk about like what feeds my soul. I think that a pirate's life would be that, because it's what you imagine and what you create.
I love it. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I really enjoyed the conversation.